Welcome to this episode of Super Fantastic Top 10. This time I'll be talking about the most prolific serial killers in the UK. Number 10. Myra Hindley and Ian Brady. Between 1963 and 65, Hindley and Brady killed 5 children between 10 and 17 years old, most of whom they sexually assaulted. 3 bodies were discovered to be buried on Saddleworth Moor in Yorkshire, and for this reason the crimes became known as the Moors murders. Hindley died in prison in 2002, and Brady remains in a high-security hospital for the criminally insane. Number 9. John George Hay. Known as the acid bath murderer, Hay killed at least 6 people and as many as 9 in London and Sussex by bludgeoning them with a pipe or shooting them to death, before dissolving their bodies in sulfuric acid, mistakenly thinking that, without a corpse, no case could be brought against him. He then forged papers in the victims' handwriting in order to sell their belongings and get rich. He was hanged in 1949. Number 8. Peter Manuel. This American-born Scottish serial killer, known as the Beast of Birkenshaw, murdered at least 7 people in southern Scotland and Lanarkshire between 1956 and 1958. Manuel was already known to the police as a convicted rapist and burglar, and his victims were variously robbed, raped and murdered. He was caught, convicted and hanged to death in 1958. Number 7. Kenneth Erskine. Erskine, known as the Stockwell Strangler, was convicted of the 1986 London murders of 7 elderly victims, most of whom he sexually assaulted and whose houses he burgled. Erskine was a drifter who had a difficult childhood and suffered from mental illness and substance abuse. Originally sentenced to 40 years in prison, he is now serving the remainder of his sentence in Broadmoor Hospital for the criminally insane. Number 6. John Christie. Ex-soldier and petty criminal John Christie strangled at least 8 women to death, including his wife, in his London flat between 1943 and 53. He buried his wife's body under the floorboards. Having been dominated by his father and sisters, overprotected by his mother and bullied at school, he suffered from a severe personality disorder which led him to commit these crimes. Christie was executed by hanging in 1953. Number 5. Jack the Ripper. The identity of this serial killer, active from 1888 to the early 1890s and guilty of at least 11 murders, has never been established. Also known as the Whitechapel Murderer, he slaughtered and dissected prostitutes around the impoverished Whitechapel area. The fact that he removed their organs caused some to believe that he may have been a doctor or surgeon with anatomical knowledge. Number 4. Fred and Rose West. Guilty of 12 murders between 1967 and 87, they sexually assaulted, mutilated and then killed young women before cutting up the bodies and burying them in the basement or garden of their home in Cromwell Street, Gloucester, in England. They were finally caught in 1994, and Fred committed suicide in prison a year later. Rose West is still in prison in Durham, Northern England. Number 3. Dennis Nilsson. Necrophiliac Nilsson, known as the Kindly Killer or Muswell Hill Murderer, killed at least 12 young men between 1978 and 83 in North London. He lured the men back to his flat for a romantic evening and strangled or drowned them. He would also keep the bodies and treat them like friends before hacking them up, hiding them around his flat, flushing the parts down the toilet or burning them. He is still in prison, thankfully. Number 2. Peter Sutcliffe. The so-called Yorkshire Ripper was found guilty of murdering 13 women, mostly in Yorkshire in the north of England, from 1975 to 80. Many of these women were prostitutes, and Sutcliffe claimed God had told him to do it. But some say it was because he was angry that one had once fleeced him. Sutcliffe was detained in 1981 and sent down the same year. He will never be released. Number 1. Harold Shipman. Though only found guilty of 15 murders, an inquiry subsequent to his suicide in prison in 2004 put the death toll at the hands of Dr. Death at least 218 and as high as 250. The Yorkshire family doctor was finally interrogated by police when a local coroner reported a suspiciously high death rate among his patients. Shipman administered lethal doses of diamorphine to healthy patients and then falsified records to suggest they had been very ill prior to death. On at least one occasion, Shipman forged the will of a deceased patient as part of a plan to make off with their money and retire. However, the motive for the murders remains unclear to this day. So that concludes today's list. Please like and subscribe and write your suggestions for more top 10s in the comment section. And don't forget to tune into the next video on Super Fantastic Top 10 and check out the links on the screen and below. See you next time!